Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Before we start tonight's show, I just wanted to take a minute out of the show to talk a little bit about Eloy Richard. Eloy passed away last Monday, very unexpectedly, and it was a shock to all of us. Eloy had been on my show a couple of times, once in March and a few weeks ago for a Canada Day St. Stephen's special, and he was a remarkable, remarkable man, talented musician, nicest guy you'd want to meet, and just the type of person you could reach out to and he would help you. I asked him about a few weeks ago if he could be on, and for this special, he did not hesitate. He just said, yeah, I'm there, Rob. And knowing full well that he was going in for a very difficult operation. That's the kind of guy he was. And, you know, words cannot express how I feel and how the whole crew here feels, because he was right here a few weeks ago. So I just wanted to say that, and our condolences, our prayers, all of our love to the Richard family, to his extended family, to all of his fans. He will be extremely, extremely missed, but he will never, ever be forgotten. There is a GoFundMe right now on Facebook at Team Eloy Richard that was started up by his manager, Jeff Liberty. So again, if you can do anything to help the family, it would be very much appreciated. So thank you, and thank you for taking the time to listen to what I had to say. So now, let's get on with the show. Tonight's special guest is MP, which stands for Military Police.
Some days.
Yeah, no. Member of Parliament, Karen Ludwig.
Thank you.
Welcome to the show.
I'm very
How
pleased to
are
be
you
here.
this evening?
I'm great. How are you doing?
A little warm, to tell you the truth. But they said that you requested a really hot studio, and you refused to have the air conditioning on. Is this your normal behavior?
They tell too many secrets.
So, you know, I'm suffering because of you. No, it's a lovely evening. It's a beautiful day in St. Andrews. So we're going to talk about different things. Now, one thing, you know, and I had asked you this, you live part-time in Ottawa and then part-time here in Charlotte County. How do you find that?
Yes, we, as MPs, we work about 26 weeks in Ottawa, and I come home every weekend if I can.
Right.
And probably the greatest challenge on that, Rob, is over the past winter is and not to complain, it's the travel schedule itself.
Yes. Is
the delayed flights or the missed connections. You know, the mechanical issues that you don't want to be on one of those planes anyway.
Yes.
But if we're sitting on a Friday, it's coming back Friday evenings, and then we have to be back in the house on Monday mornings at 10.
Right.
So it's a short weekend, but at least I get to visit with my family, and
yeah.
And they're very open and flexible, because often they're coming along with me for the different events on the weekends. And
so when you're on the airplane, are you doing work? Are you having a nap? What are you doing?
Thinking about the weekends, what we're going to do that weekend.
Right.
But no, a lot of it's
probably not
notes.
a lot of napping going on.
No, because even when you do wake up, you think, oh my gosh, I forgot something.
Yeah, yeah.
But looking at the week ahead, or strategizing on the events, looking at the calendar, you know, reading current events. And we do a lot for looking at community newspapers, community programming.
Yes.
Just trying to keep a constant pulse on what's important to people back here in New Brunswick, and particularly New Brunswick Southwest. So
you have an office in St. Stephen, and you have an office in Ottawa.
I do, and when we first started off, we started off with 2 offices. That's the way it had been in New Brunswick Southwest for about 10 years. It was an office, a part-time office in Grand Bay, and then a full-time office in St. Stephen. But I mean, through the use of technology, it was very quick that the presence in any location really, so much can be done through email or by phone.
Right.
So instead of continuing to invest in a physical location in another area, we've taken that money, that part of the budget, and that gives us more flexibility to reach out further afield.
Right.
And going into the different communities, or holding numerous town halls, and and making those, you know, hands-on connections.
Yeah, because, you know, from my perspective, and I think from the viewer's perspective, it's something you don't think about, that all these folks up in Ottawa don't live there. You know, you say, oh, well, there they are. But they're not. They're coming from different provinces and different towns and different cities.
That's
so
right.
part of this position is a lot of travel and a lot of dedication and a lot of, you know, giving up certain things at home, I would suspect.
There is, and that's why I mean, everyone has different reasons and their timing for when they enter into politics. In my case, I really wanted to be in a position where my kids were old enough to be independent, which they are.
Yes.
And that's because it is a sacrifice. I mean, it's not an easy one to be away 26 weeks a year, you know, serving your country in a different capacity than teaching. But I mean, it's also hard on a spouse, the person that's left behind. And
yes.
Today I sorted through 2 months of mail, so.
Yeah. And then instead of being with your spouse tonight, here you are with me, which I'm sure you'd rather be at home than wasting time here with me.
Well, actually, tonight he's driving my car to Hanwell.
Okay.
And my car is getting wrapped for Canada 150, so he is doing a lot of work behind the scenes that most people don't actually see.
Okay, so now wrapped, what does that mean?
We'll have the Canada 150 logos and Canada 150 you know, decals on the car.
Oh, nice.
And I'm going to drive that around all summer.
Oh, okay. Well, that's very cool.
It is cool.
Now, is that something that all the MPs are doing, or is this your own?
No, a few of us are doing it.
Yeah.
Some of us did it during the campaign.
Yeah.
But as well, it gives people, they know that you're there if your car is out there.
Right.
But it's also, you know, taking, I mean, it's a little Volkswagen Bug.
Right.
The challenge has been waiting to get it back from my daughter, who's had it at university for a very long time.
Right.
But it's just kind of a fun thing to do, especially with the Volkswagen Bug, to get that out as part of the parades. And when we go to do more town halls, we'll have that parked up front. Or if, in fact, you know, if someone ever extra special came to the riding, then we would park that up front as well. And,
cool. Yeah. Now, Canada 150, this must be up in Ottawa, just as it is here, a very, very important event. So how are things, what is the buzz in Ottawa? Because I know they're, and in fact, isn't it, it's coming up, isn't it, Canada 150? Patrick, when's Canada 150? He's not even listening.
July 1st.
July 1st.
That's
well, there you go. What day is that? Sunday? No, it's not Sunday.
It's Saturday.
It's Saturday. So is this coming Saturday?
It is.
Because you're my most important guest in the entire month of Canada 150. You are the pinnacle, the zenith, if you will. And now, tell us a bit about what's going on in Ottawa as well.
So we've been working on Canada 150 planning and events probably for maybe a year. So there's been a special pool of funding that communities could apply for, or community groups, to host different events, but also different initiatives to really not only discover Canada, but rediscover Canada. There's been the Parks Canada, you know, going to a national park this summer, and it's free. It's not the parking, because I've heard someone say, oh, it's parks. It's like, no, it's the park itself.
Right.
To get people out there. But really, a lot of it is just getting people, in many respects, refamiliarized with their own country.
With their own country, which, you know, it's funny, you forget about it. You know, we're so busy traveling south, traveling, you know, overseas and going maybe to other provinces, which is a good thing as well, but sometimes we need to look in our own backyard at all the wonderful things we have here.
Especially in our small communities. I mean, we're rural in this area, in this particular end of the riding, it's very coastal. It's a great opportunity to bring communities together and strategize of how maybe they can work together on a Canada 150 event. But I mean, we've done some great initiatives here within, I can't say exactly what it is, but you'll see on later this week. Okay. But we worked together with the local high school in the riding, and they worked on one whole float for me, and they did a fabulous job, and they did the theme, so we gave them an idea what we were looking for, and then they decorated it in their own style.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful. Now, we are taking calls this evening, as we always do. Our number is 1-855-529-8826 if you have any questions for Karen Ludwig regarding to anything. We're open to almost everything, within reason. I always say that because you never know.
You don't.
You don't know what people are going to. I mean, somebody might ask you, how often should I change the oil on the car, or how do I make an omelet, or You know, which I guess, do you like to make omelets?
I could give the answer for the omelet, but I couldn't give
not
the answer for the oil.
For the oil.
I think it's every 5,000 kilometers, but don't quote me on it.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. I
have to
like
say
the
Google
sounds
it.
of that. Okay, so we're going to talk about a few serious subjects here because they are important. And one of the big ones is international trade. We are dealing, obviously, with countries around the world, and specifically one that's kind of tenuous right now is the United States, and specifically the softwood lumber. So what's going on there?
So that agreement actually expired, within the last year, and the government has been working on our side with the federal government in the U.S. on working out parts of the deal that would be best for the industry. And certainly it isn't any deal, but it's the best deal for the industry. For those of us in ridings like ours that represent rural ridings, I mean, softwood lumber is a big issue. And what I have personally done is tried to make the issue much more relevant, even within the House of Commons, because if you're representing, some MPs representing a city riding, they don't necessarily see the direct implications of softwood lumber. Some people think of it as just boards, 2x4s that are being exported. But certainly when we look at softwood lumber, it could be the use for the labels on medicine bottles, tissue, in a Kleenex box, diapers. There's so many other uses, decking this summer when people are out there working, that, any change to that in terms of the supply could affect price, but also it affects so many jobs in small rural communities that in many places those are the one industry in that town. And what we've also tried to get across with our travels in the United States in terms of Canada-US relations is making that strong connection for Americans of what any disruption in trade might cost on their side. And I mean, we are in an era, there seems to be increasing protectionist policies, but certainly when we look at global trade, any disruption in trade within North America will mean jobs on either side of the border. And in the United States, 9 million jobs depend directly on trade with Canada.
Which is a significant number.
It is, it is. So whether it's softwood lumber or it's the potential of the border adjustment tax, it will have impacts on both sides. I mean,
and is that message getting through to the federal government in the States, do you think?
I think the message is starting to have some, getting some tentacles out there, certainly. We've, certainly as a federal government, we're taking a laser approach. It wasn't that long ago, there was a bit of a cabinet shift. Well, that was intentional, it was strategic to get those more closely aligned with Canada-US relations, to be the ones that are on the forefront.
Right.
I think that element has worked, or is working. The other aspect is refamiliarizing North Americans on the impacts of NAFTA and the positive impacts of NAFTA. I mean, it's been in place for 23 years, so I think our supply chains have become so integrated that people don't often see how integrated it is, and if there's any disruption, it will mean jobs.
And over that 23 period, obviously, during whether it was Republican or Democratic rule, it was an existing policy. So that it's not something that all of a sudden the Republicans are saying, well, we don't buy into it. So do you think that, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you think that perhaps there's not a clear comprehension of what it is?
I think that's I think that's a fair assessment to make, considering that it's 23 years old. It's been a very successful trade agreement, but during that 23 years, there's been so many other trade agreements ratified at the same time, and the globalization.
Right.
So it's very hard to measure just on its own the impacts of NAFTA when we have so many other trade alliances that are out there that have taken place during that 23 years. So here would be an example. If we look at manufacturing, when I was in the United States, I was in Detroit, Chicago, and Washington was our final stop. And the area of manufacturing, the manufacturers, and even in the auto industry said, so often people look at NAFTA as, one person said, as the boogeyman, that it's taken all these jobs away. But the the flip side of that is, at the same time that NAFTA was moving forward over the last 23 years, technology has increased exponentially.
Yes.
But the policies have not changed to keep pace with that.
Right.
So when we look at manufacturing, manufacturing has doubled actually since the signing of NAFTA 23 years ago. And the jobs have shifted to more technological-based opportunities. So as much as we don't have as many, assembly line workers, because so much of that is now been, through innovation, has been more automated, there's a lot more jobs that are higher pay with greater opportunities because they're more the machine operator or the technician or the engineer. So we have to do, at this point, I think we have to do a better job of helping people make that transition and that shift to other career opportunities that could be some parallel. There was an example that a senator gave regarding Kentucky, and he talked about the Kentucky coal mine closing, a coal mine in Kentucky closing. And then through economic development, they looked at what are the skills that a coal miner would have and how could they be transferred to another industry. It was a fascinating shift to think about that. And the response that they came back with, and very successfully, was manufacturing of aircraft parts.
So a similar skill set to both.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's that paradigm shift in the thought process to think, well, we can use somebody who's been trained or has skills in this type of job and now apply it to something else rather than say, well, those jobs are gone.
That's right.
Rather than just look at one side of the equation, you have to look at both. And of course, the other thing is always that we have to educate people in general to be aware of this. Because as you say, a lot of times for every 100 jobs lost, there might be 200 created, but we don't hear about it. That's not what's promoted. It's always, let's focus in on the other side.
And then, but sometimes with that, though, too, Rob, is that when those 100 jobs are lost, we're not keeping the pace with technology.
Right.
So it's if we're looking down the road at a specific industry or a sector, if we could work with the sector in terms of if they're working towards more innovation, which many sectors are, then what do they need in terms of the skill sets to keep the workers that are there, continually increasing, and gaining the opportunity and not losing it outright.
Right. Okay, so we've covered trade. Now, we're going to talk about Lyme disease, because I know right now this is a huge topic nationally and specifically in New Brunswick, and more specifically in Charlotte County.
Absolutely.
It's a major, major problem. So what is Karen Ludwig doing about it?
I could say that during the campaign, I know that during the campaign in 2015, the only area that was designated as endemic was Grand Manan, and in terms of Lyme disease. But I constantly would hear it in all different parts of the riding. And so I'd said to people, if I get elected, I'm going to take it on as my own personal cause.
Good for you.
And so that's what I've done.
Yeah.
I've worked closely with the Minister of Health on it. I've held 2 roundtables to inform MPs, all party MPs. It didn't matter which party they were with. I invited them all to a roundtable, and it was so that they were able to become more aware of the significance of Lyme and take it back to their home communities. And then I held a second roundtable. This one I co-chaired with Elizabeth May, and we had more MPs, and we also had senators come in. And then that was lining up with when the federal framework on Lyme disease was presented in the month of May. So.
Now, you grew up in Charlotte County, I take it. Did you? Are you from New Brunswick?
We've been here for 30 years.
Okay, so now 30 years ago, do you remember ticks? Did you hear about ticks, or is this something that's increased over time? Why are people significantly more aware of them than before, would you say?
I think there's a couple of things. One, veterinarians have been more aware of it.
Because of pets.
For pets.
Right.
So about 9 years ago, we took our dog Nacho in for a routine checkup, and they said, can we check for Lyme? And I said, well, I know a little bit about Lyme, but he doesn't have any symptoms. They said, oh, it's just a random test we've been asked to do by ABC University. Right. And so I said, sure, and he tested positive for Lyme disease. And at that point, I mean, yes, he'd had ticks, and my husband had removed them. So early diagnosis, early treatment, and he just passed away at the ripe old age of 14
Oh, God
recently.
bless him. That's great.
So there's that part, but I do think that, I mean, certainly as an MP, one of the things that I've worked very seriously on over the last 18 months is raising awareness of Lyme disease. And I think the media has done, is improving in terms of sharing examples like this regarding Lyme. And the Lyme community, are strong, strong advocates. The pivotal point, I believe, was the federal framework on Lyme. When that was May 2016, that gave so many people hope where they felt so hopeless. And so 700 people, were involved in that conference, all different types of stakeholders sharing their stories and giving voice to Lyme. And so out of that, the federal framework, because these are federal jurisdictions, it was guidelines and best practices, surveillance, and education. And so I believe the biggest point that I could do would be on the education side, so informing people, but also it is a strategy of working together with all levels of government and stakeholders. As a federal government, we could make recommendations into jurisdictions where we have authority, and then work together with the provinces, the municipalities, the health authorities. I mean, there's so many different layers within that. So that's all part of that federal framework. So it may not be, it's not what so many that are suffering from Lyme wanted, but it certainly is the beginning.
Yeah.
And now we saw just recently the province of New Brunswick signed an MOU with the federal government on the surveillance side. So there is movement, and so much of that as well is in terms of research. So I worked very closely with the minister, and in 2017 budget there was $47 million earmarked for climate change related health-borne illnesses. And one of those is a vector-borne illness such as Lyme.
Right.
And then more recently, Minister Philpott pulled out $4 million directly for Lyme research. So that's certainly the beginning, and never in the history of Canada has there been a federal framework on Lyme, nor specific money earmarked for Lyme research. So
yeah,
we are starting.
It is something that is debilitating for the people that do get it. Mm-hmm. And as we were talking before the show, for many years it was a mystery disease. The ailments would be diagnosed, and the medical community would say, well, it could be this, we're not sure. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't something that jumped out at people, that here was this little tiny insect that was causing all these problems. And here we are 20, 30 years later, very aware of the problem. Mm-hmm. And I think this is fantastic, what you and the Liberal government are doing in terms of awareness, because that's really what it's all about.
It's awareness, but the big part of that is the research piece as well, Rob.
Right.
So, for example, within the medical, profession, there is not. They're looking for more evidence in terms of Lyme disease itself. Right. Whether it's the diagnosis and also the symptoms. It's a very complicated disease.
Yes.
Because the longer you have it, it will morph into present different symptoms, and so often people, one, don't always show the bullseye rash, and two, they don't know where or when they were bitten, or if they were bitten, but they know they have some pretty odd symptoms. And we're hearing much more about Lyme, and people will identify with that more, and they're going into their family doctors and specialists. And so I feel optimistic for the Lyme community that there is a push on it. I know that the Lyme advocates will not back down, which nor should they, but working together as trying to collaborate on the best outcomes.
Yes.
And also helping those that are for so many they're so helpless.
Yes. Okay, Karen, we're going to take a quick break on Rob Patry Live. We'll be back in a few minutes with Karen Ludwig.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're back with Patry Live. Our special guest this evening is Karen Ludwig. If you have any questions, please call us in 1-855-529-8826. I had to twist Karen's arm to come on here.
You did not.
And you know what? I have never begged so hard for somebody to come on. You've been avoiding me like the plague. You're giving me a complex. But I did say, I promised you there'd be some calls, and so far, you know what? They're avoiding me. It's not you. There's something going on out there, and I don't think...
It's the warm, sunny evening.
I know. You know what? If I had the choice between watching my show and being out there, I'd be out there. Although not in those high-grassed fields.
That's right.
Because I don't want this tick thing. Have we got a call? Oh, we have a call.
Okay,
we have
great.
a call from the town of Harvey, just north of here. I guess, is it northeast, northeast? We've got Ed Christie. Ed, are you there?
I am, sir. How are you this evening?
I'm very well, thank you. How are things up in Harvey?
Things are very, very well.
You got snow yet, or is...
No, the ice has gone out of the lake. Things are good up here.
It's good, so it's like summer.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so you have a question for Karen Ludwig.
I do. It's nice to see Karen there. Thank you for Ms. Ludwig. Good to have you on the TV.
Nice to hear from you, Ed.
My question is the rumor. Is it true that your government's contemplating bringing back the long gun registry?
No.
No?
No. I mean, think back to the 2015 campaign. That was constantly a rumor that was put out there. We are not supporting the long gun registry. It is not returning.
Yeah. Well, that is good news, because rumors run rampant, and it's nice to hear this from the horse's mouth.
You know what? There was recently in the House of Commons, actually, someone had put that forward as well. There is no appetite for the long gun registry within our government. So.
Oh, that's great. That's good news, because that was a very costly endeavor, and I would think that money could have been well spent, much better spent on repairing the roads, especially the 636, which is the road I live on. We could do some road work up here any day now.
Well, I can say two things. One, I agree that it was costly and inefficient, and unfortunately, those that were the honest gun owners were the ones that had their names on the list. And then 636, I'm sure needs work, and that would be under the province.
Well, anything we could put a plug in there. Well, thank you so much for taking my call.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ed, are you still there, or are you gone?
No, I'm still here.
So when you're out hunting, how do you deal with ticks?
Exactly.
Well, again, it's like everything else. Once I get home, you got to really make sure you frisk yourself real well to make sure that everything is dumped off of there. I find that it's worse out in the wild early in the morning when the grass is wet.
Right.
Once that grass dries off a little bit, it's not quite as bad. But I am out in the wild. We've got some super beaver dams and ponds around here that we look after. Our Harvey Lake Association is very active in environmental issues, and we're doing bird counts and all that sort of thing on a constant basis. And this year it's really phenomenal, even though the spring has been such that it's not real conducive to getting out there all the time. But the duck population has really exploded up here this year.
I'm just going to add.
Sorry, the tick population?
No, the duck.
Oh, the duck population.
So
now, does any of this affect ticks? I mean, it must, right?
Well, we've had the neighbors talk about it. I have yet to see them myself, but one of our neighbors down the road walks his little dog along the same beaver pond that I check out every day.
Yes.
And he said he has found some ticks on his little dog. So.
Now, when you hunt, do you bring a dog?
No.
Okay.
No.
So you're just looking after yourself.
Yeah, and hunting is not the big thing. It's the shooting sports. I've been doing the hunter education program up here now for about 44 years, and every year we always have students that really have an interest in it. Perhaps maybe just can't afford everything. So it's nice to take those young people, those youth, out to the local gun clubs and give them some proper training. And this is what makes it so easy with the long gun registry not in effect, that we can switch firearms back and forth to make sure that those young people have the proper fitted firearms. So
right.
I guess that was my concern there, was it's so easy right now just to change that from year to year and that sort of thing. So
Yeah,
I'm
no,
very
it looks like
Karen, that's not going to be on there. Thank you so much for that.
it looks like.
Can I just add something there with Ed?
Oh, just lost my earpiece there. Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Ed, thank you so much for talking about the examples in the Harvey area. One, your lake system, I think, is second to none, and I have talked about that at the town hall in Harvey. But as well, in terms of hunters, there is the increased risk with Lyme disease or the ticks with hunters. And I have more recently been in to talk with Ross Faulkner from the gun dealer about ways that maybe we could work together on strategies. And if you're interested, within my office, we actually have Lyme tick kits. And they're little devices for removing a tick. There's little containers for dropping the tick in the container and having it sent off for testing. And then as well, if someone in your area, if you don't mind helping us really share the awareness, the province recently signed an MOU with the federal government on surveillance. So there is a real interest on where people are picking up the ticks, and then also on the testing side. So unfortunately, it's those that are the most active that are more likely to be susceptible to Lyme disease or getting bitten by a tick.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would love to get some of those containers and devices and pass them along and do some training. I'd love to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time.
Awesome, thank
you,
Ed.
We'll see you at our local fair in August.
Okay, sounds good.
Appreciate the call. Take care now.
Thank you.
Our phone number, if there's any more calls, is 1-855-529-8826. And we're here with Karen Ludwig talking. Well, so far we've covered a few subjects. The last one was Lyme disease. One of the more serious issues, and we're talking about women's issues, is violence against women, which is something, I don't know if it's because of social media, if we're becoming more aware of it, if it's increasing, if, you know, which is good that we're getting that information out there. But it seems that it's something that's sort of been put on the back burner, put to the side, not discussed. You know, another one of these things, let's not talk about it. You know, the less we talk about it, maybe it'll just go away. But it isn't going away. It's terrible.
It isn't. And so I sit on the Standing Committee for International Trade. I also sit on the Standing Committee for the Status of Women. And for almost a year, we studied violence against women and young girls. We looked at violence against young girls, women in universities. They're most often likely to be sexually assaulted within the first 8 weeks of attending school. No one tells you that before you get there. The cyberbullying that's taking place, I mean, that's a new entity when we think of technology and social media, that we really have to get some serious policies in place over that. And but when we also look at women's shelters, there's not enough of them. And we look at the wraparound services. That's something that, you know, we as a federal government are really focusing on. And if we can reduce, ultimately eliminate violence against women and young girls, it affects everybody. You know, it's not just the mom in the family, it's also the son that is there and is watching that. Or, I mean, these are people that are the most, you know, some of the most vulnerable. And where are they supposed to go? I mean, so many of them are isolated. If we think of where we are in rural communities, there's real challenges there. There isn't public transportation. It could be an issue of skill set. It could be an issue of social stigma. So we have worked very hard as a government in terms of putting policies in place, whether it's social housing, funding for new shelters, training for women. Also the whole concept of cyberbullying we've looked at in terms of strategies. And in the most recent budget, some of the recommendations that we had put forward through our report were actually implemented in the budget. So that's really quite unique all in itself. There was the training. There was a private members bill by the previous opposition leader for mandatory training for judges. So that bill did pass through second reading, and also we made some small amendments, but it went through committee. And now that's before the Senate. And even during that, within the 2017 budget, we actually put the government put in specific funding for training for judges, and we heard from the Canadian Judicial Council that they've already started implementing it, so that training is there. And we're seeing a ripple effect down even to the provincial level. Some provinces are putting mandatory training in for provincial judges as well. And all that is really part of rebuilding or strengthening our justice system. And so people are maybe more likely to report, but also that there would be some solid solutions to getting people out of these situations and breaking that cycle of violence.
And reporting is definitely a problem, I would think, for younger girls, for women who are in an abusive relationship or are getting, as you say, cyberbullied from somebody. Who can they turn to? Because this is part of the issue.
Yeah, it's part of the issue of who to turn to, and then even the people that they're turning to, the organizations, they have been seriously underfunded for years. So within the 2017 budget, it was to look at increased funding for community advocates and agencies that are working directly to help women break that cycle. So it's the reporting, it's what happens when they do report, and depending where they are. And so few of them actually go forward through the justice system, and then in terms of convictions, it's a low rate of conviction as well. So there's lots of different elements that need to be considered. It's where's the advocate within the system? So we heard that a lot from the devastating stories that women came before the committee, or moms and dads that came before the committee and talked about how their child had taken her own life through cyberbullying. And God bless the parents that had the strength to be able to share their stories, because they want that to end.
Yes.
And what the advocacy work that they've done, and also sharing their stories and working within the justice system, really does make a difference, because it puts a personal slant to it, and no means no.
And it's something that we are becoming educated about, but we still have such a long, long way to go. And I mean, not that it's as obvious as abuse, but even equal pay for women is something. I don't know if you're touching on that subject, but it's part of the stigma that has been going on in our society for far too long.
Yeah, that's the whole pay equity for both men and women. It's a critical issue, because it's about economic security. And when we can increase the economic security of all Canadians, we're breaking a cycle of poverty or creating opportunities. But we've heard so many people come before the committee and testify the significance of education, but certainly the significance and the value of affordable, accessible, quality childcare. That there aren't enough openings across the country, and that does limit moms and dads if they're single parents. And typically, there have been so many examples where in different parts of the country, people will say, I went to Alberta because there's so many great opportunities, but then when they realize when they want to have a family, my gosh, childcare is $30,000 to $40,000. And housing is so much more expensive, that we're starting to see some of those young people come back because of, maybe it's a better access to childcare spaces. But in the 2017 budget, the government set aside $7 billion to roll in for accessible, affordable, quality childcare positions. And
we've also got on our list here talking about the New Canada Child Benefit, which kind of lines up with that. But we're going to take another quick break, and we'll be back with Karen Ludwig on Patry Live. Camera one, camera three, wait for two. We're on 5, 6, and 7. Hello, we're back on Rob Patry Live. What I'm repeating are the things that I hear in my ear constantly. Because Karen was kind enough to say, how do you put up with this maniac out back? I said, I don't know. He's driving me crazy. I'm trying to think here, which is a difficult task for me to begin with. And he's constantly saying things in my ear, and we got a fly in here. It's very, very difficult. Anyway, I apologize for, you know what, every now and then I lose it. So I do apologize. Yeah, I know. Rein me in, Karen, rein me in. Okay, so you're on with Rob Patry Live. Our lovely guest tonight is Karen Ludwig. And just before the break, I said we're going to talk about this new Canada Child Benefit. So tell us about that.
So the new Canada Child Benefit it's to put money into the hands of those that need it the most. So we're not giving a tax credit to the top 1%. It's to those that really need it. So that actually, in our particular area, every month, about $3.8 million comes to New Brunswick Southwest families.
Good.
So it's significant. We hear in our office the difference that it makes for families to have that money coming in. And the other aspect to it, they're not paying any of it back. It's tax-free. So it's a tax-free benefit. They can use it as they see fit. As a government, we did remove some of the tax credits. One was a sports credit.
Right.
And I could say that as a mother, but also not only as the MP, but also as a mother, $100 in a sports credit does not go very far. But the money from the new Canada Child Benefit goes much further. It's putting more money, it's giving choice to how someone wants to invest in opportunities or the day-to-day needs of their child or their children.
Yeah.
And it's making a big difference across the country.
Now, is this similar to what used to be called the baby bonus?
Wasn't that
Have you
taxable?
heard that term? Well, my mom used to get it for me and my sister. This was way before you were even around, I guess. But I think it was...
No, my mother received the baby bonus too.
Did she?
There were 5 of us. Yeah.
Well, it was taxable?
So it's the same kind of idea.
I never got it.
But this one is,
for kids.
it's more money.
Right.
And for those that need it the most.
So is it like a monthly check or direct deposit into their account?
It's a monthly check.
Okay.
And it's based on the number of children that you have and they're in the different age categories that they're in, and then also the level of income.
Right.
So as your income increases or your children are older,
it goes down.
It would decrease.
And how long does that last? Till they're 21, 18? Or?
I think until they're 18.
So that's very helpful to families, because families today need all the help they can get. It's a difficult time.
It is a difficult time, and in an area like ours, I think it's somewhere around 10,000 children are actually benefiting from the Canada Child Benefit. That's significant.
Yes.
The money that was not there before, and it's not taxable, so it stays within the family, and they can go from there.
Okay, so now I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that I have about your gig in Ottawa, because there's things that I'm very interested in. Okay, so do you have your own chair?
We have the same seat. Yes, we do.
Well, you call it a seat.
Yeah.
I apologize. It's not a chair, it's a seat. Okay, and then are you way up somewhere?
So I'm the back bench. So you have the ministers, you have parliamentary secretaries.
Yes.
And then and it's based on alphabetical order. So in the area that I'm in, ironically enough, Fundy Royal, St. John Rossay, and then I were actually sitting within the same 5 seats.
Okay. And
so we have the same chair or the same seat every time we're in the House of Commons. And I remember my seatmate from Guelph, because it's Lockhart, Long, Longfield, Ludwig.
Okay.
And my seatmate from Guelph is Lloyd Longfield, and Lloyd said every once in a while he'll remind me, he said, you know what, I can still remember that first day when I met you. You said, is this not the best homeroom yet?
Right. Yeah. So now, how long will you be in that room for? Like,
is it
yeah.
It depends.
I shouldn't call it a room. That's very disrespectful.
In the chamber? So it would be, it's not disrespectful
I always say everything wrong.
No.
I'm sorry. I apologize. It's not a room. It's a House of Chambers? Is it Chambers of Parliament?
So within the chamber itself, you're there when we have house duty.
Yes.
So everyone's house duty, we can have different schedules.
Yeah.
And then we're there every day for question period.
Right.
And then you...
So do people ask you questions?
No, the questions are asked of the Prime Minister or a minister.
Okay.
And then we can ask questions. So I've asked questions on, let me see, lumber, softwood lumber. I've asked questions on Lyme disease, actually twice on Lyme disease. Anyways, I've asked lots of different questions. And then we also have the opportunity to give a 1-minute speech.
So if you have a question, do you raise your hand or press a buzzer?
So if you have a question, you put it in ahead of time.
Okay.
And then, because sometimes that minister may not be in the house at a certain time, so that's the important part. Is sometimes they'll ask you, does anyone there have any questions? But you are well prepared ahead of time for submitting the question, and something that you want it to be relevant.
Okay.
I hear some people in the house will ask questions, and I think, oh, what a waste.
Yeah.
Or the 1-minute speech.
Yeah.
I always make sure that I'm talking about New Brunswick Southwest.
Right.
And anything that impacts us, because I want everyone in the chamber to hear that, and also to be able to take that tape and be able to share that on social media.
Which is what you want. See, if I was there, if I was you, I'd be asking just nonsensical questions
you
constantly.
Would not, Rob.
Oh, absolutely. I'd be, because I have such a short attention span, and there'd be things going on now do guys throw stuff and get into fights and things like that? Does that ever happen?
I haven't seen any fights or anything thrown.
What about banging on the desk?
Not as much from our side.
No. On the other side, you get it.
More so on the other side. I'll say that the Prime Minister and the whip, so the whip's like a school principal.
Right.
So just like a classroom.
The whip, yes. I remember that from Canadian history.
Yeah. So, but part of it is it's decorum in the house, and it's trying to change the tone. So the more one side gets escalated, if let's say we were to react, the volume goes up, and the more people bang and then they make noises, the longer it takes, for someone to ask a question or someone to actually respond to the question. So we lose some of that time frame, and so I actually find that kind of stuff. I personally find that nonsense.
Right.
I do.
Right.
And I remember one day I was giving a speech in the house. It was on softwood lumber, and my daughter was in the galley with 2 other friends, and they were watching, and I was getting heckled on the other side. And
that's terrible.
Then so they were going on, and the speaker said, they called me on a point of order. So I sat down, and the speaker said, well, actually, the member from New Brunswick Southwest, that was not a point of order. Please continue. So I got back up, and they started again. And I do not remember doing this, but my daughter said, Mommy, did you realize you put your finger up? I said, oh.
Is that a no-no?
Did it work? I don't think it happens very often. It's like you do that in teaching, you would just...
slow down the proceedings.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think the changing, if we look at women in politics in particular, that does change the tone.
Yeah.
And it also changes sometimes the questions that are asked or the input on committees.
Yeah.
It isn't just having diversity for diversity's sake.
Yeah.
It's because we offer different experiences and different approaches.
Different perspective.
And that will change not only the tone in the House, but also the input and even on policies.
Yeah. See, I'm all for women in politics. I think women should be running the world, because we haven't done a very good job for the last 10,000 years or whatever. I think it's time that we do see a different perspective.
I think the perspective definitely needs to be broader, but it's not women versus men or diversity versus non-diversity. It really is having that mixture, because no one side is right.
Right.
It's just gaining the different perspectives that people are talking and sharing different ideas that maybe you wouldn't normally think about. So, for example, on the Toronto Stock Exchange, the companies that have diversified boards tend to be more profitable than the ones that do not.
Right.
If we think of international trade, we're living in a globalized world.
Yes.
Canada has 33 million people. We need to be, trading and buying our goods and services from around the world. But part of being more successful with that are the ones that can think of different approaches, different ideas, different strategies to feed into policy.
And I love that Mr. Trudeau, as Mr. Trump came into power, south of the border, made sure that he and other members of Parliament were going around to different countries and saying, you know, let's keep trade going, let's keep it going, let's keep it going. So he hasn't backed down from that, and I think that's wonderful.
He hasn't, and for as a nation, we need to have you know, good, solid trade deals.
Yes.
So, for example, we recently ratified the European Trade Agreement. Phenomenal opportunities, especially for us in New Brunswick Southwest.
Yeah.
We are the springboard between Europe and the United States. Our fisheries, you know, the goods that we're producing here, could be lobster, it could be our scallops, it could be our aquaculture, sea urchins. You know, at some point very soon, that's going to be duty-free to Europe. That will give us a tremendous opportunity to not only grow our markets, but expand our markets, and also increase ourselves, increase our companies on the innovation side. So how do we do things even better?
Right. Now back to the house, do you get refreshments?
That's a very good question. Yes, but it's not good, Rob.
Why?
It's not good.
Why?
This is my freshman 15, because you get water in the house, so you can drink that, that's great. But when you go outside the chamber and you're in the members lounge, you know, it's heavy foods, you're sitting all day, and the Prime Minister would often, often say in National Caucus, remember, colleagues, the cheese and the crackers in the members lounge is not dinner.
Right.
So it really is, over the next 2 years, I'm planning to hopefully get back to better eating habits. And
well, I guess because you're so busy, and there you are, and now there's food in front of you, and you're not making wise choices.
And if you have house duty, you can't leave the house.
Right.
So there were times
it's like
when...
prison. It's like you can check out any time, but you can never leave.
Well, I wouldn't quite call it prison. But you can leave.
Yeah, I'm putting words in your mouth, so I do apologize.
But sometimes, house duty can be 12 hours.
Yeah, well, that's a long time.
It is. So there's sometimes we're walking home at midnight, or...
Now, what, you get a cup of coffee?
You can get coffee, you can get soft drinks that are in the lounge.
Yeah.
And
ice?
You can get ice.
Nice.
You can get lemons and limes, and...
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. No liquor, though.
There's
you
no
guys
liquor.
aren't getting all liquored up out there,
There's
are you?
no liquor in
That's
there.
not going on.
No.
Because that's what I've heard. But that I'm not
from
going
this MP.
No.
No.
No, I just made that up. Okay, you know what?
Rob is sharing too many stories. He's making them up.
Yeah, I'm just making stuff up. Everybody that watches the show knows that I make stuff up constantly. What about donuts? Do they have donuts?
No donuts.
Pizza?
No, it would be breads and lots of cakes and cookies at the end of the day.
Lovely.
Oh, yeah, it is lovely.
And the food up in Ottawa is good, right?
It's good,
So
but
you gotta
actually for
mark
September, well, I can tell you that on less than 5 fingers, I've actually been to the market.
Oh.
And that's one thing that I've actually found I was surprised about, because I thought we would have a bit more time to get around and learn more about Ottawa, but there isn't the time.
Because you're too busy working. Okay, you know what? I got to just cut you right off here, because guess what? This is the end of the show. Now, we did offer you another either 2-hour stint or 24-hour stint if you want to hang out here, but you probably have to go back to Ottawa at some point and do some real work.
I'm actually here for the whole summer.
Are you? All right, then we're here. We're going to be here for 24 hours. Thank you very much, Karen Ludwig. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching tonight. Rob Patry Live. I hope you'll join us again next week. You better. Thanks again. Take care, folks.